I'm
Right
toast.
on. Right on.
This is a Crowd podcast.
Hello, I'm Geraint Thomas.
And I'm Tom Fordyce.
And you've just entered the Geraint Thomas Cycling Club.
Brought to you by Zwift, the indoor cycling app where fun is fast.
Welcome. Happy St. David's Day, Tom, and to all our Gtcc members.
This is a nice touch. It feels like it's come around quite quickly this year, G. Maybe it's just we're having so much fun doing your podcast.
I was going to say, yeah, it's definitely the podcast that's making time fly these days, especially through lockdown, innit? But did you celebrate St. David's Day then, or...?
Yeah, I didn't at the time, G, and I realise now this was a significant oversight for the chairperson of the Geraint Thomas Cycling Club. So my promise to you is that I'm going to go back and celebrate it properly. How should I be celebrating St. David's Day?
Oh, just have a Welsh cake, mate. It's probably the easiest thing to do at the minute, innit? With all the recipes we've got flying in, it's be pretty simple now.
It's not as punchy as St. Patrick's Day then, because that's a little bit livelier. I'm not knocking the Welsh cake. I'm just conscious there's no booze that you've stuck on the St. David's Day list for me.
Well, yeah, I'm not. you can definitely get some Penderyn whiskey in you, or some
cheeky.
Brains beer, or oh yeah, mate, if you want, you can go full hog. You can dress up as well as one of those, the Welsh women with the bonnet thing on their head, and you go full hog, mate.
Maybe one of the anthropomorphic daffodils that you get at the Six Nations, when someone turns their whole face into a daffodil bulb.
Yeah, and a few leeks. Wave them around.
Leeks always good. So talking of Welsh cakes, what does a good Welsh cake need?
Well, to be fair, people like adding a lot of different stuff these days, don't they? Which is fine, like our Gtcc members. We're up for anything and everyone. But for me, if I had to choose, I'd definitely go traditional route. Just a bit of sugar on top, I took some Welsh cakes once to the team around the classic sort of time. And guys, we started putting like Philadelphia spread on them and jam.
What?
And yeah, I wasn't up for that. But yeah, whatever floats your boat.
Well, people have been getting in touch. This seems to have got people super excited, G. We had a message from Sid Gaskin, who posted a picture of his first attempt at making Welsh cakes
Oh, I
in
saw
our
this.
Facebook group. You see this?
Yes.
He got a fair amount of heat, poor old Sid. Looking at the comments, I think the mistake he's made is that he's used the oven. I understand this is a big no-no, that he should have used, a bake stone or a sort of super heavy bottom frying pan?
Yeah, like a griddle type thing, I guess. Yeah, definitely not the oven, though.
Okay. Then we had a message from Chad Wilson. Chad says, as an American, I have no idea what a Welsh cake is. I need a Welsh slang/food interpreter. So, Chad, if you need a recipe, G, I believe you've got a beauty.
Yes, so Sean Evans sent in a handwritten family recipe, actually. So here goes. 8 ounces of self-raising flour, 4 ounces of butter, 3 ounces of sugar, 4 ounces of sultanas, raisins or mixed fruit, 1 egg, and Dad always added a pinch of mixed spice. Now, yeah, good on you, Dad. I'd definitely recommend that. Bit of that. Right then, so you heat up your griddle. There you go, Tom. No oven involved. To medium temperature. You mix in your flour, butter and sugar together and add the fruit. Mix in an egg. Roll it out and cut into circles. She's also added children love bears and ducks. I can vouch for that as well. And cook for 2 minutes on each side of the griddle. Welsh cakes can be served plain with butter or being indulgent with cream and jam. Well, you know my thoughts on that, Tom, but yeah, there we go. Lovely.
Delicious. And we can probably stick that recipe on our social channels as well. If that was too quick a read for you, didn't have a pen to hand, we'll stick it on Facebook, we'll stick it on Twitter, we'll stick it on Insta. We've also had a message, G, from Aled Daniel, who I'm guessing with that first name is Welsh. He has sent his granny's recipe, which includes a little bit of milk. But he says they're never quite sure how much milk. But his little tip, or his granny's tip, lemon rind and a little dash of grated nutmeg.
Oh, interesting.
Did you see this, G, as well? We got a really nice picture sent to us by Alex Hicks. It's of 3-year-old Susie baking Welsh cakes using her Mamgie's recipe during lockdown. He also emailed to say, we lost my late mum to pancreatic cancer 5 years ago. So sharing her recipe with the club is another small way we can continue her memory. That's nice, isn't it? So this recipe actually includes a little pinch of salt. He says they can also work with chocolate chips if you fancy mixing it up.
Lovely. So keep an eye out on our socials this week, guys, and we'll be sharing all the recipes with you. Right, enough food talk anyway. Let's crack on with the pod.
Welcome along to a brand new podcast called 21st Century Football, a complete guide, well, so far that is. This podcast is all about celebrating the best of the world's most beautiful game, but only if it happened in the 21st century. This series is all about championing the greatest footballers of the last 20 years. Each week we'll have a variety of hosts, including YouTube star Statman Dave, Stephen Tries.
Got that underwear range.
You've got a pair on now, haven't you, Stephen?
No, I soiled mine this morning.
And myself, Will Brazier, will also feature radio legend Adam Brown. Find us on your regular podcasting sites, as well as our brand new YouTube channel. Search 21st Century Football.
It sound right, boy.
Okay, time for another proper cycling pod, I think, Tom, because they seem to be going down really well with our club members. So this week, I've gone for breakaways.
I like it a lot. I mean, there's so much to get into with breakaways. There's always a break, isn't there, in every day of a of a stage race. It's just a question of whether it stays away. I'm thinking of, there's so many great break days. Do you know what I'm thinking of straight away? And this is maybe a slightly different sort of break because it's a solo break. And most solo breaks are glorious but doomed. I'm thinking of Chris Froome on the Fenestre, the Giro in 2018. Is that maybe the greatest solo break of all?
Definitely in recent history, for sure, because it wasn't just, you say just a breakaway, but it was for GC as well, so many people wanted that back, and he won the race that day. So yeah, I'd say for sure in recent history that is the best. One that pops to my mind as well is when Brad went in a solo breakaway that was always doomed. It was in 2007 tour, my very first tour. They seem to be dying out though, the solo break, and I think coming from a pure fan's point of view, I think they should continue. There should be more, just like long stages. You got to have a long stage in the tour because that's what used to happen. But then coming from a pro's perspective, I don't really want to go on a break for 230k knowing I'm just going to get caught. So, but yeah, come on guys, someone needs to take one for the peloton and keep that going.
What you're saying is you want some cannon fodder.
Yeah, basically, but there's something sort of romantic about it, when you're a kid, and like it used to happen a fair bit more. Okay, maybe sort of like the less strong teams, but yeah, we need to keep that alive.
Definitely. It's often someone from one of the Pro Conti teams, isn't it? The sort of second division or the championship level, to use a football analogy of cycling. So it's a Wanty Group Gobert, it's a Total Energy, it's one of those sponsors who they've paid their money and they want to see a return on it. They want to be watching it in the finish area and pointing at the TV screen in front of all their mates and just going, that's my team, that's my team.
Yeah, exactly. The chances they're going to get in the tour of winning the stage is a few and far between. They obviously have a chance, but if they can get the exposure for 5 hours on, it's broadcast all over the world. So yeah, come on boys, get out there, get up the road.
So what we're saying is that the GTCC is a break-friendly club.
Oh, most definitely. Yeah. Just not on a club ride though. Don't be attacking on a club ride like on our Zwift rides. It's a social ride, that is. Once we got numbers on our back, it's dog eat dog then. Just go from the gun, do whatever you want, but yeah, keep it social on our little Zwift rides.
Yeah, anyone on our 6 o'clock Wednesday evening regular Zwift Club rides who launches off the front with a kilometre to go is suspended for a week. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying as interim chairman.
A K to go isn't so bad. They can be, a 1 week suspension, but the further out it is, the more weeks they get. So if it's from the start, you've got a year ban coming your way. So yeah. Behave.
Right, G, this is a complicated one, isn't it, the topic we're doing today? So we need an expert. We need a really good guest on this one. Who have you brought in for us?
Yeah, so I went for an old teammate of mine, and basically he was known for getting in breakaways, and not just any old breakaway, one that is likely to succeed. And by the end of his career, everyone was sort of looking at this guy. If he's there, then the break's likely to go. So yeah, thanks for joining. Welcome, Steve Cummins.
Thank you.
How are you, mate?
Really good. How are you?
Good, mate. Good. Yeah, I could have given you a bit more of a bigger, listed off some of your Palmares, but I thought I'd leave that to you. Just so everyone knows, the biggest wins. You've had 2 stages of the tour, right?
Yeah, 2 stages of the tour. Stage in the Vuelta, stage in Tirreno, stage in Pays Basque, stage in Dauphiné, Tour of Britain. It's
not bad.
It's not a lot, but...
Is there an Algarve in there as well? Are you doing yourself down? Wasn't there a cheeky win on the Algarve? You beating Contador?
Yeah, there's a few little victories like that, but they weren't really breakaways. They were just other stuff.
Ordinary wins.
No, they were good, but it's not like G, it's small victories in comparison. So
They're all good, mate.
I've got so many questions, Steve, because I think this is a really, really good topic. So I'm going to start off with a few simple ones, right? Who decides who's in the break?
Well, it depends. It depends on the scenario, It depends. Yeah, like I say, it depends on the stage. So if it's a stage that's controllable, if the start is controllable, then normally a sprinter's team or a team that want to control the race can dictate who is in the break. Maybe it's because the road is narrow, maybe it's because the road is wide, maybe it's because they have so many numbers. And if there's 2 or 3 teams or 4 or 5 teams that want the same outcome, then it's much more easy to control. If the terrain is more mixed and and the road is wider, or the road is more technical and the road is more up and down, then it becomes much more difficult to control the start of the race. And they were the kind of stages that I kind of liked, because it becomes like a game. Like, you have to be strong, you have to be fit, and you can really like hurt the opposition, if you like.
Do you get breaks from the word go? Because when we're watching on TV, sometimes people will join it late in the stage, and sometimes the TV coverage just doesn't start from when the flag drops. So is there stuff that we don't see on TV that you guys will have seen, like constant sort of proto breaks going off the front and then getting pulled back before whoever it is decides, actually, this is the break for today?
Yeah, I think there are some days, I don't know, I haven't watched too much of the tour, you know, because I've generally been in it, but I think...
it's a good excuse, G, to be fair.
But some of the days, like the stage that Steve does well in, are the days where everybody at the start line knows a breakaway is very likely to succeed. At least sort of 80% chance is going to go, and everybody knows it. So everybody that isn't in a team really fighting for the yellow jersey, you know, is trying to get in that break, and it can race full gas for an hour minimum. You know, it can go for an hour and a half, whatever. And a lot of that probably isn't shown on TV if they're not broadcasting from the very start, you know, and then they could cut through to halfway in the stage, and then the breakaway's formed, and then the peloton are riding a bit steady behind, and it can look easy and just sort of laid back. But those starts, like especially as Steve was saying, if they're up and down at the start, or even if you start up sometimes you start up a mountain, you know, 8-10k mountain, and well, they are by far the hardest stages, because, you know, it's just from the gun, just boom, out the blocks. There's been times as well, like the tour, I think in 2020, there wasn't even a breakaway one stage, you know, so it's got, I think more and more teams either have a sprinter now or someone they believe can ride GC, so I think there's less and less of that sort of couple of guys going off on a long flat day. And there's been times when guys have just sort of like been pushing each other and, like, you know, taking the mickey, trying to get someone to go, you know, nobody wants to go because they're like, well, what's the point? I'm going to be out in front for 160k, just head against the wall, basically.
So, Steve, are people, certainly towards the end of your career, when you'd had the big win over the Col d'Aspin and then the one in Intermont, did it make it hard? Like, the more success you have as a sort of breakaway specialist, does that not just make it harder? Is everyone not just like watching you and go, oh, Steve's off, right, follow this one?
Yeah, so in 2016, that was my best year probably. So I won in the first race of the year, I won in Tirreno from a breakaway. Then I won in Pays Basque from a breakaway. Then I won in Dauphiné from a breakaway. And then I was at the Tour, and I think it's fair to say I was quite heavily marked. But I saw it as a game, actually, and I had nothing to lose. And I just had to change the strategy a little bit. So very patient, and use other riders almost as sort of stepping stones and try and create the scenario, the ideal scenario for me, and never try and force anything, because you can't force it. You're not that strong, you know, so you have to sort of ride off other people. So I really enjoyed that side of it, like the thinking side of it.
Yeah, it is definitely tough to make it happen. I think, like Steve says, you have to sort of choose your moments. Like, you're almost like, well, I've got 3 goes at this. You know, if you jump in all the time, you're just wasting so much energy, and like if you try and go with every move, it's just not going to happen. So you kind of, especially a day where everyone knows it's a break, you know it's going to take a while, so you maybe gamble a bit, you sit in the middle of the group for half an hour, 45 minutes, and you're like, right, okay, I'm going to try now. But yeah, there's a bit of luck to it, but then it's also definitely an art as well, because it's no surprise that the same sort of guys seem to always get in it as well.
So how do you decide, Steve? Let's say you've made a break successfully. Let's say there are 5 or 6 of you. How do you decide how much work you personally should do? Because you obviously want this break to stay away, so there must be an inducement to getting on the front and driving the pace. But I'm guessing, too, you just want to save as much energy as possible.
Yeah, well, ideally, that's the thing. So that would be my primary thought: save as much energy, like do as little as the guy who's doing the least. But sometimes you have to look at it and go, hang on a minute, I'm the favourite here, I can drop all these guys, I kind of need those guys. So they're the kind of moments where you might invest more if the peloton was closing. But so it's kind of situational, but I'd say generally I would be looking to do as little as the guy that was doing the least, because you, like G says before, you don't really have control. It's the peloton behind that has the control. So sometimes it's just about that initial combination going at the start, which is a good combination, and it's too difficult for the peloton to bring back.
There's no better stage though than when the peloton is chasing but they've misjudged it and the breakaway ends up staying away. Like there's done a few stages where Tour Down Under stands out and it ends up it's slightly downhill, suddenly it's a raging tailwind. Well, not suddenly, everyone knows it, but the teams have just misjudged it. Normally they're like, oh, we can bring back, I don't know, 3 minutes over the last 50k easily, normally. But then suddenly they got this raging tailwind, it's slightly downhill, and then suddenly the guys like in the peloton going flat stick, you know, there's like, could be 3 or 4 teams chasing, suddenly one of those riders are gone, another rider comes up, and that's why the peloton has the power so much, because there's so many boys to ride, basically, if needed. Yeah, it is something really satisfying, like even if you're not there, but just to see the breakaway stay away, especially when the peloton are so keen to bring it back.
Are you doing little deals on the spot, Steve? So let's say in this scenario we gave you there's 5 or 6 of you in this break, and you're all wanting to do as little work as possible. Does someone become almost like the patron, the boss of the breakaway, saying, listen, we need to keep going here because otherwise the break's done, so listen, you do a minute, then you do a minute? Or are you even sort of getting more subtle than that, going, listen, if you do me a favour here, I'm going to do you a favour in 2 days' time?
Not really. I think it's just, I don't know, it's almost like an unwritten professional etiquette that you just roll through, you know, and it depends how big the group is. If there's 6 riders or 8 riders, it's quite obvious if someone's missing a turn. If there's 28 riders, then you do always get that. There's always one guy that wants to do much less, or there's always his DS saying, oh, you know, so...
well, that's his excuse. Oh, my DS is telling me to sit on. They always try that one.
Yeah, so it just depends on the scenario, but generally, if you get these hard starts, what happens is you get good riders in the breakaway, and good riders are strong riders, so they don't really shirk the work, because if everyone wants to make it a success for their own chances to win, so everyone sort of commits. But that's why I never bothered with going in the breakaway when it wasn't going to be good riders, because that's when you start getting all those turn dodgers and like yeah, because there's nothing worse than that.
Talking about turn dodgers, I remember one stage, it was 2011 Tour, right? And I was in the break with Edvald. We were in the same team.
Edvald Bosenhagen.
Edvald Bosenhagen, yeah, Norwegian guy, quality rider. There was about 10 of us in the break. It had 30-40 seconds. It's like, right, this is it. This is going to go now. But it turns out it's towards the back end of the race, and suddenly Garmin or some team had missed it, and they ended up racing for Team GC, which is like kind of rare, really. But basically, Team GC is your best 3 riders every day, so it can be different riders every day. But basically, you take the cumulative time of your best 3 riders, whatever. And they were racing for nothing else, really. So Team GC was their priority, and so they started chasing this break because there was whoever was second or third had a guy there and they didn't, so they were like, right, we need to bring this back because otherwise we're going to lose this Team GC. And the guy that was in there was Linus, can't remember, we called him Linus the Penis because he was Gerdeman.
Gerdeman.
Or Penis, whatever you want to call him. And he was the reason they were chasing, and he was sat on. And I was like going nuts at him. I was like, what are you doing? Just sit up and go back. Or at least, you know, pull a turn. Like give, you know, help the rotation, help us go quicker. But he would just sat on the back, and Garmin chased full gas for, 15, 20k. Ended up bringing it all back together. Then another break immediately went, and I actually missed that. Edvald got back in it, to be fair, and ends up winning the stage. So it was all right for us in the end. But for that, situations like that, there's nothing more frustrating, really, is there?
No, exactly. Yeah, that's you become pretty unpopular quite quick doing stuff like that. But what goes around comes around. You know, you race like year after year with the same people, so you know, and it's not wise, I think, to be a guy like that, because there's certain situations, not just in the breakaway, but in the peloton, where if you're not liked, it's not helpful, because you can almost, people don't want to help you, or people won't move out your way, or whatever. So it's better to have a good relationship and be respectful to the breakaway, respectful to cycling.
Yeah, I've got a little black book in my head where people I just don't let out of a. If there's a gap and they're like, oh, GG, and there's a car coming up or something and you need to move out, you're going in the car, mate, unless you brake. Like, I'm not letting you out.
Right, come on. I want one name. I want one name from this black book.
Maybe in a couple of years when I've retired, but, I need to stay out of the black books as well, mate.
Yeah, maybe you're in other people's black books.
They used to have a list, and Dimension Data. They used to write that on the list, like who was the guy that pissed you off the most.
Who topped that list
on each day? I was never involved. It's always Bernie, Cav, and Renshaw that were writing it, and they just vent their anger and on this list.
Can you imagine quite a few being in Cav's handwriting?
I just never go there. Well, I think the guy, I don't know, I probably shouldn't say, but Ed Petit, he was called, remember Petit? He was like Adrian Petit, I think, or something like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean.
Is he in yours, Stu? Is it? Can you cross-reference that with your black book?
I wouldn't know.
He's not. The thing is, he's probably a lovely guy. He's just a bloody menace on the bicycle.
That's the thing. There's there's a few guys who are like, everyone just sort of hates, and then you speak to the teammates like, oh yeah, but he's all right when he's in your team, and then the next year he's left that team, and they're like, oh, he's such an arsehole, isn't he, that guy? But yeah, for another day.
In that scenario, Steve, would you give someone a bollocking? The six of you, and someone's not doing their turn.
No. I never talk really too much in the race.
Why? Because you're going hard.
I just tell them, like, what are you doing? Or I just say, okay, we stop and we'll go back to, and all this effort's wasted for nothing. And then I'd say, like, I'll win tomorrow, so don't worry. Something like that. That's
even worse. That's like when your mum tells you a problem and your dad just does this quiet voice, and the dad bit is the more scary. That's what you're doing there, Steve. It's this quiet menace. Yeah, I think the thing is, like, some people, I remember I was in Austria and I'd won quite a lot of races and I didn't get selected for the tour. And there was one kid there and he's like, yeah, you're a big professional and all this, and I can't pull. And I said, look, I don't care. I won a lot of races now. I don't care. If you want to win a race, you have to pull, You might not be strong enough, but there's only one way to find out. And if you don't pull, then we'll go back. And like I say, it didn't change my life. So he started to pull.
Did you stay away?
I broke my bike and threw my bike against the wall. Do you remember that? I'll send you the GIF. There's a GIF on it,
I was going to say, Steve says he doesn't talk too much in that, but he definitely, I think he learned that, because I think it's safe to say, Steve, you were a bit more hot-headed back in your earlier years.
Oh yeah, all that stuff with Steve Peters and the chimp. The chimp was like, the chimp was raging wild, but yeah, after, as you grow, you get a bit more wisdom and you learn to try and keep the chimp in the box, or at least feed it a banana or whatever. And then again, so yeah, you develop, don't you? You evolve. So
there was one stage actually in one of my first years as a pro in Portugal. We weren't in the break actually. I think we were in the gruppetto, the back group. And I don't know what happened, but Steve, I think Steve's just twigged what I'm saying. And I think it was to do with like you just giving a turn on the front, because when you're at the back you need to get within the time limit. Like you have to finish within a certain percentage of the winning time. So we were like, we all need to just contribute just to make sure we get to the finish here. And I think somebody wasn't and started giving Steve a bit of shit. Next thing I hear is just Steve just like hands off the bars, big like the Hulk, just like launches his bottle down, water everywhere. This guy, sure enough, he started to ride anyway, so it worked. But yeah, yeah, it was eventful with Steve. It was always good fun.
It just sometimes it just doesn't make sense. I just don't understand what some people think, and that's when I would get frustrated. But like I say, when I was older, I didn't get frustrated. But when I was younger, gee witness it.
I think the worst part, though, as well, is when the breakaway's gone and there's a few teams, more so GC teams, they want the breakaway to come back. But it's like a game of like poker then. It's like, oh, we'll pull when you start. And then they're like, no, well, we'll start when you start. And then, or they blame another team, well, we'll start when they start. And then suddenly, before you know it, like there was a race in Spain one year, Catalonia. And to be fair, the time gaps messed up as well, so they were getting the wrong time checks. But suddenly they messed around that long and they were like, no, you go. The breakaway had about 15 minutes by the end, And then it was a massive, like, huge chase, the last 50k, super fast, everyone panicking, you know, all the directors in the cars behind going nuts, like, oh, you need to chase, blah, blah, blah. And I think the breakaway ended up still winning by about 5 minutes, and someone from that break almost won the race overall, which would have been a huge, like, surprise. But yeah, it's nothing worse than, like, teams sort of like, just put your cards on the table. That's one thing that the Sky were always pretty good at, which sort of maybe worked against us in the end at times. But we'd just be like, right, yeah, we're up for this, we got a guy who can perform, so we're just going to start riding. You know, a lot of other teams a bit more like Green Edge or Mitchelton, they'd be a team that would never ride. You'd always be like, you got the Yates boys, like, they could easily win this race, just commit. But yeah, it's just different tactics, teams, whatever.
Right, explain to us, Steve, why the peloton doesn't, if it can catch a break, why it will often just dangle a break at what will be conceived as a sort of a safe distance in front. Why the peloton often doesn't want to catch a break too soon.
So normally the reason for that is because if they catch the breakaway too soon, what can happen is then you'll get like a counter attack. So the whole process will start again, and you'll get a group of fresh riders that will start that process again. And you got to like rechase. So I think that's the reason why. Even though it's there's always like that window where you want to keep it so to stop like the counter attack. So when it's like the moment, right, you say, right, now we're going to close it. That's got to be so where you catch them like pretty close to the finish, where the speed's so high that no one can jump away. So yeah, so you have to keep the gap fairly high to, because if the gaps comes like, let's say 1 minute, for example, then it becomes, there's an opportunity there for a counter attack and riders to go across. So you have to keep it always regulated.
And also from the chasing side of things as well, Tom, you get the chasing team has to judge it as well. For instance, if in the Tour, stage 12, whatever, and we're riding, as in Ineos, say we've got the yellow jersey for argument's sake, we're riding, we don't want the gap to go massive, because then potentially the breakaway could stay away and you're just going to have to ride all day. So you want other teams to have that hope that, yeah, it's still catchable. Then you don't want it to be too close, because then they'll take longer to come and start helping you chase, if that makes sense. So you kind of want to get that happy medium where other teams feel like they can still go for the win, but you want them to come, well, earlier the better, really. And there was one thing that Nico Portal, who passed away last year, actually, but he would always say he will never go to another DS and never go to another team to ask them to ride, because it's a sign of weakness. So we stick to our plan. This is what we're doing. And when other teams come, they come, but he's not going to somebody else and saying, oh, can you ride with us, please? Because, well, yeah, it shows a bit of weakness. Basically, everyone wants to do the minimum possible, and it's a way of trying to get somebody else to do the work for you, really. And then in front, they slow down sometimes. You know, they're like, oh, the peloton are only letting us have 3 minutes, say, so we're going to slow down. So then they slow down, so it makes the peloton slow down, because the peloton don't want to catch them then too soon. So it's just a massive game of cat and mouse, and yeah, it's a lot of calculations going on the road, I think.
What's that feeling like if you are in a break and it's touch and go whether it's going to stay away, and then the peloton does catch you and it catches you where it wants, maybe sort of a kilometre out? Because on TV, it's almost the most devastating thing, where you see someone who's absolutely smashed themselves to pieces trying to stay away, and it's the point they just glance over their shoulder and they see the hounds chasing them down, and they just think, uh-oh, it's over.
What's the feeling like? Oh, you're gutted, aren't you? But yeah, that's the risk. That's the risk, isn't it? But if at least you're disappointed you didn't get the result because you're so close, but then you can also be proud. You know, sometimes you have to think about the performance, and you can break it down. You can think about, oh, I did really well. You take positives out of it. Like, I did really well to get in the break. I give it my all, and another day it might have worked. And I think you have to think about it like that. But there's definitely the period you have to get that takes you to get over. Bloody hell, we were so close.
Yeah, I think there's been a time when I was actually the one catching them. So my first stage win in 2018, like road stage, I caught Mikel Nieve, who was an ex-teammate of mine. I think 250 meters to go. He'd been in the breakaway all day, and we finished up a mountain. I don't know, it must have been 8 or 10k long. So he's had a big buffer, and then suddenly the race behind starts. And once, the GC guys, once you start racing, like, you've been sheltered all day. You're a lot more sort of fresher than the guy in front who's been, away all day riding. And I actually, I didn't feel that bad for him really because I'd won, but I like the guy, so it was a bit like, oh yeah, sorry mate, but yeah, it's got to be tough for when it's so close like that, because that would have been, I think, his first tour win. So but yeah, there we go.
Also as well, for some of these riders, a rider like that, it's maybe that might be it. That might be his only ever. It might be so close. So yeah, I don't know. It's hard sometimes.
It's cruel, isn't it? You went past him so quickly that day, G, as well. I remember watching it, and that was a strange thing because, as you say, you'd been sitting in the wheels, and then the race just accelerated, and he must have thought, Mikel Nieve must have thought, for a fair amount of that last climb up to La Rosière, he must have thought, this is it, this is my moment. And then, lo and behold, his old mate comes past him, ruins his day.
Yeah, I think it was probably one of those where it's a roller coaster of emotions, Probably halfway through the stage, he was like, oh, I don't know. And then, a bit later on, oh, yeah, no, we can do this. And then thinking, I don't know. And then suddenly, yeah, on that climb, he probably thought, wow, this is it now, I've got a chance. But yeah, and then I think it showed how dejected he was. I don't know why I'm laughing. It's not funny. He's a mate. But like in those 250 meters, I think he lost about 20 seconds. Like he went from first to maybe like fifth, and just. But yeah, that's the way it is, isn't it? And you'd never give up a stage of the tour, or any stage really.
Is there anything else, Steve, that you might do? I heard this story once about Thomas de Gendt, who we're going to say in your presence is the second best breakaway rider of the last 10 years, how he would deliberately lose time over the opening days of a Grand Tour so that he in no way could be a threat to any of the jerseys, and therefore he would be more likely to stay away in a break.
Yeah, no, exactly, that's it. Like the GC, that's why people say, oh, why are you riding the back? It's like, okay, well, why am I riding at the front? I'm here to win on this day, and this day, or to at least try and win on the rest of the race. I'm just trying to get from A to B, and it's probably beneficial that I've lost time on GC, because then if you're a threat on GC, you get less leeway once you're in the break. They won't give you as much time from behind. So if you're not a threat on GC, you get more leeway, and there's more chance that you'll stay away. So it's beneficial to lose time. So these are all considerations.
Yeah, I remember going back to the Sky days again when Froome had the jersey and we started up quite a hard mountain, and there was a rider, Pierre Roland, French guy, and he's still racing now actually, but he was fairly close on GC. I say fairly close, 5-6 minutes. And when you've got the yellow jersey, you kind of, the further from GC they are, the better. So you can just let them go. You don't have to ride hard behind. They can have 10 minutes at the finish and they still wouldn't be a threat. But he was at that stage, which was just on the limit, so it's better to not let him go, if possible. If it really shit hit the fan and it got really hard, then you'd let him go. But at this stage, we were still sort of controlling, and he'd attack 2 or 3 times, and every time we'd slowly accelerate and catch him. And then after a while, he was like, "Why don't you let me go?" And we were like, "Why, you're too close. We're not going to let you go." And then he was like, "Oh, okay." And then he stopped, and then the break went. The best guy was 12 minutes, and happy days for everyone. And then. But probably he should have been a little more switched on to actually realise that. But all sorts of things like that come into it as well.
Yeah, I think that's the interesting thing. That's what I used to find fascinating in the start, the combinations. We talked about it before. Some people are going in the break to try and get green jersey points or Kingdom Mountain jersey points, or so sometimes they're going in the break to be like I talked about before, a stepping stone for their teammate to come across to. So there's all those kind of considerations. And when you look at that start list in the morning, you look at the stage, and you can start to pick out which teams are doing what, and that helps you then, who you follow at the start, who you might not want to follow, and stuff like that. There is a real, I would say, I don't know if it's science, but there's definitely a deep. It's necessary to think about it and plan, definitely.
Yeah, the big GC teams is definitely right, don't let anyone from them or them go. Anyone else can go, but these 3 teams, don't let any of them go. And generally you get that a lot, I would have thought. With the sprinters, it's the same. For instance, say you got Caleb Ewan, Cav and Sam Bennett, who are all top sprinters in different teams. Caleb's team would be right, don't let anyone from Cav or Sam's team go, because if they go, that means they won't ride and help us chase the break back. So, you have a list of definitely not them teams, and then the rest is, as we were saying, the combinations then and everything.
And sometimes you miss something and you're like, why does he keep following me, this guy? Or why is this team always here? And then it clicks and you're like, oh, bloody hell. Yeah, so you got to do your prep.
I like the idea that you have to be an opportunist, Steve, as much as all those calculations. So thinking about your tour win in 2015 on stage 14 up to Mond, which is the route you did in 2018 as well, G, didn't you? Up the Monte de Jalabert, they call it. So if you haven't seen it before, this is what is it, about 5k that climb? 4 or 5?
3? Oh no,
short but steep, 4. Isn't it?
6 or 7.
And then you've got this long flat bit on top of the mountain, which is an airstrip. So Steve, talk us through that afternoon. You're up against 2 French heroes, Thibaut Pinot, Romain Bardet. How come you were the one who came out on top?
So ideally, I was in this group. I think there's 28 of us, something like that. And I'm looking at the group, and you're looking at the names, and there's good climbers there. There's like Uran was there. He's better climber than me. Pinot better climber than me. Bardet better climber than me. Simon Yates or Adam Yates, I think it was Simon. Better climber than me. They were all these like great climbers, and like you say, the characteristics of the finish was too hard really. So I wanted to attack from distance ideally, but I couldn't really because Pinot had 2 teammates or even 3 teammates there, so they were just going to control it. So it made no sense, because if I'd have attacked, okay, maybe I'd have got 30 seconds, and like we were talking about before with teams controlling it and just they'd just left me there hanging really, and then caught me at the bottom. So I had no choice really. I was forced into that situation, and I wasn't thinking about winning. I was just thinking, I just removed myself from the race in a way and just thought, right, I'll hit this climb, I'll use them to draft a little bit at the bottom where the gradients, where it's beneficial to be in the wheel, and then when it gets steep I'll just time trial, and that's all I can do. All I can do is make sure I come to the top of this climb with everything, with everything I've got, and that's it. And then we can see from there. And then when I summited, I was going up the climb after a K, I was like, oh, I'm all right here. I'm like halfway through I might get top 10. And I was like, okay, now I pass Yates. Oh, bloody hell, this is all right. And then I pass Uran, it's like, oh, this is good. And then I can see Pinot, and then I can see Bardet, and Bardet's all wobbling. He keeps looking over his shoulders. And luckily for me, Pinot caught Bardet, and that was it. They both looked at each other, and that was all I needed just to get the momentum and sort of catch them. And then it flips then, because then we're on it's better terrain for me. It's a slightly downhill, flat. And for me, it was just like, I couldn't believe it. I was laughing. I was like, God, I can't believe this. I'm going to win a stage here. But you still got to execute it. You still got to. It would be easy to make a mistake, you just panic and you're like, wow, this is a moment you've been waiting for. And luckily I didn't panic, stayed calm, and executed it.
Yeah, because basically, Steve, those two, they didn't stop, but as you say, they looked at each other, and that gave you the chance to, that, as you say, that slight downhill, you took a run at them, just hit them 500 to go or something, and they were both suddenly just like, oh shit, there's us just thinking, how am I going to win this? And next thing you know, Steve's flying past 10k an hour quicker, and race over for them, and Steve crosses the line. And was that Nelson Mandela Day as well, or was that the other win?
Yeah, no, that was Mandela Day. But there's things like that, So I caught them, and I had to, because they kind of how would you call it, concertinaed out into the road, the two of them, because they basically stopped cooperating, I think. And as I caught them, they kind of got in my way, so I had to feather my brake, and then that just gave them, when I had to feather my brake, that just gave them the chance to get back in the wheel, and they got in the wheel, and then there's a chicane, and I'm sure you're aware of this, that at the time, Pinot, he was a little bit cautious in his descending, in his cornering. He had room to develop, let's say that, and I thought, right, I'm going to go around the corners as fast as I can, and I kept just checking where it was, and I came out the last corner, and it's had 10 meters, so then it was just head down and stuff like that. But yeah, I think just knowing the opposition, their strengths and the weaknesses, you can really exploit that, I think.
It's amazing though how many people don't think like Steve or can't see things. There's so many dumb bike riders around. Seriously. Like, you'd be surprised. Linus the Penis being one of them. It's all right, he's retired.
I think part of the reason for that is because opportunities come around pretty sparse, really. You know, so when you do get an opportunity, you have to be like really switched on to it, and I think that's the interesting thing, really. That because you get in big teams, especially, you get really drawn into doing a specific role, and often that role is you have to bring so and so to a point in the race, and you forget about what made you a professional in the first place, which was probably winning. And if you do that for like 5 years or 10 years, it's like all of a sudden you might get your chance, but you've forgotten what to race. You've forgotten how to race. You don't know how to race your bike anymore. You're just like a robot. So that's like a really interesting thing for me, that trying to keep that alive, really, that spot, because there's always a balance, because you got to do your work for the team, but yeah, you want to keep guys motivated as well. Like they can win. Anyone can win. It's just on the right circumstances.
So, G, we've been looking to fill a few positions in the Geraint Thomas Cycling Club. I'm wondering if we should create a position for Steve, and I'll suggest that we call it Breakaway Guru. He could be the Gtcc Breakaway Guru. If any of our club members have any breakaway questions, maybe they can call you, Steve. I'm not sure how we're going to give out your number. Maybe they can do live Breakaway Guru chats in the middle of a race. Right, Cummins, what the hell do I do here?
Yeah, I'm fully happy for that. Yeah. I'll tell you his number now. It's 078-253. Yeah, sweet. You up for that then? Breakaway Guru.
No problem. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, cheers, Steve. Thanks for joining us. And our new Breakaway Guru.
Can I just say thank you as well? It was a pleasure to talk with you, G.
I feel like there was something sarcastic that you were going to follow up with there, Steve. That just sounded too nice.
So, Thomas, week 8 of this podcast and week 8 of you using Zwift. What's new? Found anything?
Yeah, I have. What I've started doing, G, is there's a rough window when I know I'm going to be able to train. So I just look on the events feed on the Zwift Companion app, and I just try and pick out a training session that looks, I won't say fun, that looks testing. And there's always been a beauty on there every time I've tried it. There was one that was called anaerobic capacity into VO2 max. So all sorts of alarm bells were going off. And it was brutal, but it was again, I was so impressed by how much or how hard I had to work. Like, I was pedaling for about an hour, and it blew my doors off, I'll be honest. It absolutely blew my doors off in a good way. I was like draped over the handlebars by the end.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because I find the same. Like, to be honest, I haven't done that many workouts on there, but I did one before, and it's exactly the same thing. Like, or when you do a race, you know, suddenly you just try so much harder when you're on it. Like, if I just go out on the road and you just do your effort, that's it, and you go home, you don't think too much about it. But suddenly, when you've got other when you've got other bike riders around you, you do push on a little bit more, don't you?
You do, definitely. And if you're listening to this and you fancy trying Zwift, just go to Zwift.com to start your free trial. You'll also be able to join our weekly GTCC group rides every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Hope to see you there. So in this section, we always try and give our listeners some tips around the subject we've been talking about. So if you're on Zwift, if you're out with your mates and you want to try and beat them to the set of traffic lights, and you want to know when you should make your break, when you should chase one down, because it can get competitive. I mean, I'm asking this to you, G. I can't remember the last time I saw you in a break.
Yeah, it's tough now, to be honest, because even when I'm not in great shape and I want to go in a break, which happened last year, like generally after the tour when I've put a few kilos back on and haven't ridden too much, but and I want to go in the break just to try and get a better workout, people just don't let me go now. Like, without sounding like all big-headed, but like, well, we're not letting you go because, you know, it's going to be harder to chase, blah, blah. So, yeah, now these days, if I want to work out, I just have to ride the front of the peloton most of the time. Unless, like we were saying with Steve, you know, it's rare that you can force a break, and if the peloton don't want you going, you're not going anywhere. So that's my excuse anyway.
Did you try and do one in a Tour of Britain in 2018? So you've won the Tour, to be fair to you, and then you've enjoyed winning the Tour, again, to be fair to you. Wasn't there a stage early on in that Tour of Britain where it was almost like you'd forgotten how many burgers you'd had, and you launched this break, and then your gut went, Whoa.
Yeah, pretty much. It was more an attack at the end, to be fair, actually, and it was because the stage was in Wales. It was finishing in Newport, and I knew the climb perfect. I'd done it as a kid so many times. It goes up to Celtic Manor, the hotel, just out on the outskirts of Newport, and it's a steep little thing, maybe only a K long, but I was like, oh, I've just got to attack here. No matter how I feel, I'm on home roads, just won the tour, I'm going to attack. There's going to be plenty of people there. So I go, and the first 30 seconds, it felt like, oh yeah, I'm going here. Like who knows? I could do something. And then suddenly, 31 seconds, and boom! Like as you say, the gut was wobbling. My legs just went to jelly. And but then, as Steve was saying about the whole launch pad thing, some quick step guys, Bob Jungles, really good guy, really good rider. He used me as a launch pad. He went away with another guy, and then suddenly my team leader, who wowed poles at the time, is like, oh crap, well, I don't want this guy to stay away now, and it's only 8k to go or something, and Bob's got a good gap. So then I was like, oh man, I've got to get back to the front now, and I was almost spewing my guts up. Managed to get to the front, do a couple of like turns on the front, and luckily we caught Bob with about a k to go. But yeah, wow, it wasn't best pleased. Kept calling it a good TV attack. But yeah, I just had to have a go, didn't I? But yeah, unfortunately, I definitely didn't have the legs.
Fair enough. So with all the knowledge that you have from that doomed late surge and stuff that happened before you got really good, what are the tips for our listeners, for our club members?
As you can probably tell from listening to this episode, so much can come into it and go right or go wrong. So it's just sensing that moment, sensing that blood, when, like a shark, you can sense that danger. You can sense people are tired. That's the time to go. On a hard section as well, don't try going into, a tailwind, or even a flat headwind. You want to go where, you can get a gap and then, build on it. But, yeah, you need a bit of a sixth sense and just try to be aware of who's around you as well. I think that's the biggest thing,
Be more shark. That's what I'm taking from this.
Yeah, be more shark.
Be more shark.
Less sheep, more shark. Right, Chairman Tom, it's time for our weekly meeting. What business do you have for us this week?
So, usual circumstances this week. We're going to start with some appointments. First up this week, it's the Gtcc official broom wagon. So, G, for someone who's getting into cycling for the first time, maybe hasn't watched that much, can you just explain for us what a broom wagon is and what sort of qualities we'll be looking for in this role?
So, basically, the broom wagon is the van that drives behind the race, where anybody that gets off and is unfortunate enough to get in their own team car jumps into the broom wagon. But then also the back group on the road, the gruppetto, the group that finishes within the time limit, so just inside the time limit, so a certain percentage of the winner's time, that is also known as a broom wagon. So you can there's two sort of variants. I guess that's only popped into my head because of COVID now. But there's two varieties of the broom wagon, so I think we could have both.
Well, the only person to put themselves forward so far, G, is Mark Griffith. He says he's half Welsh. I think that's meant to convince us to give him the job. What do you think? Should we give him the gruppetto version of the broom wagon, or shall we ask him to drive the van with literally the wooden broom stuck on the back?
Yeah, I think we give him, he can drive the van then, can't he? I think that's a bigger job, It's boring, but if you're committed to the club, then you'll do it, He might have aspirations to move on up the broom wagon ladder and become the gruppetto man later on, but yeah.
Okay, good shout. Our second appointment today is for the official Gtcc club photographer. Now, Stuart Bridwell got in touch to say that our podcast, and this is good news, is helping him get through a crap start to 2021. He says, how about a club photographer? A couple of years ago, I completed a BA Hons degree in photography at the grand old age of 55. Stu, I think you're in. Gee, what do you reckon?
Yeah, quality. I've absolutely no idea what a BA Hons degree is, but it sounds good. Sounds hard work. So, good job, mate. And yeah, he's in. Photographer. We got one.
Okay, well, listen, we might end up with two because Chris Gams would also like to apply for the position of club photographer. He took a cracking action shot during the first group ride we had on Zwift, and managed to do it without falling off his bike. It was you and him, G. So can that count as proof that he's decent?
Yeah, that's fine. I'm all good with that. Right, Tom, we've also had a suggestion for an episode. I think it's clear that the listeners think we're out of ideas.
Yeah, I saw this one too. This was Rowan Almond, wasn't it? He suggested an episode on fans. This was on our Facebook group. He says we should chat about the madness of following races to stand roadside for hours just for a few minutes of high-speed, blurry action. He talks about the joy of picking the perfect spot after a feed zone so you get loads of loot, and the shock of how loud a peloton is as it flies past. He says, our son has learnt that the race is close when you can see the helicopters. So now, whenever a helicopter flies by, he thinks there's a bike race. Love that. I think it's a brilliant idea, G. I'm not...